The Israeli parliament has voted to approve a new coalition government that ends Benjamin Netanyahu's 12-year run as prime minister. The new government would be headed for the first 2 years by the religious nationalist Naftali Bennett, who will then hand over the premiership to the centrist Yair Lapid in 2023. Israel's longest-serving leader, Netanyahu, was prime minister since 2009 after a first term from 1996 to 1999. But he was weakened by his repeated failure to clinch victory in the polls since 2019 and by an ongoing corruption trial in which he has denied any wrongdoing. The new government, formed after an inconclusive March 23rd election, plans largely to avoid sweeping moves on international issues such as policy towards the Palestinians and to focus on domestic reforms. Palestinians were unmoved by the change of administration, predicting that Bennett would pursue the same right-wing agenda as Netanyahu. To discuss the latest Israeli leadership, we are now joined via Zoom by Professor Micheline Ishey, the director of the Human Rights Program at the Joseph Korbel School of International Studies from Denver in Colorado. Ishey, a very good evening to you. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to The Globe.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. Now, let's reflect firstly on the final coalition agreements that include term limits that were signed on Friday.
Well, yes, there is a new unity government, as you have explained, that will be shared by two leaders of opposite party, two smaller party. They are not the major vote getters. And there is an effort to create a coalition that will make sure that Benjamin Netanyahu will not be returning to politics by having term limits of 2 terms or the maximum of 8 years. So in this sense, this coalition has a very specific goal in mind. It's to make sure that Benjamin Netanyahu will not return in politics and with the hope also not to come back in politics as the head of the opposition.
Now, Professor, can you give us your assessment of the shaky ground on which this coalition is standing on? I mean, this uneasy marriage reportedly seeks to focus mostly on economic and social issues rather than the major diplomatic issues like the Israeli and the Palestinian conflict.
It is true that the multiple agreement establishing the coalition focus on reviving the economy and civil society, but it's not really a surprise that this major focus is shared on economic concern as the Israeli governmental crisis prevented the passing of a budget for the last 2 years. So the anticipated new budget will include funding for new hospital, new university, new airport. There's discussion about 60 billion for infrastructures and welfare in Arab towns. And also there's thanks largely to the influence of Mansour Abbas, the marginalized Bedouin population has received for a long time, it was overdue economic attention. So you're correct to suggest that there will be no current discussions on a two-state solution. Part of the reason is because the coalitions has a lack of consensus. Bennett believes that there shouldn't be a two-state solution, while Lapid thinks otherwise. If they were to push those solutions forward, probably the coalition will fragment and will fracture very, very fast.
So what's the historical significance then of Arab political parties finally being legitimate partners, as it were, in Israel's politics and government, whether the parliament vote succeeds or not?
Well, it is a first, certainly, for a government, for a party like Ram under Mansour Abbas to enter government. This is unprecedented, and I think it's important because the Arab Party may assume the role of new kingmakers in the future coalition, even if this government does not succeed in its 4-year tenure. After all, we know that Netanyahu began negotiation with Mansour Abbas, but really it was Lapid and Bennett that were more successful in gaining his support for the new government. So I do think, in a sense, it is significant that, however short-lived, this government will give the credence to the possible inclusions of Arab parties in the future, even if it does not survive. In other words, if a right-wing party can invite an Islamist Arab party under the leadership of Mansour Abbas to join this coalition, then the left, however weakened, or even centrist party, would be able to do the same with other Arab parties that come from the Arab joint list. So without being seen or as traitor to the Israeli cause. So this can also, on the future, even if it's shortly, increase the voting participation of Arab voters who have long felt, rightly so, that their demands were not being heard in Israeli politics. So the Arab participation in a fragile government that could easily be short-lived has nonetheless created a form of incentive for all sides to create some form of stability, because everybody will be losing if the coalition does not survive. One should remember that Israelis do not want yet another election in such a short time, and these politicians will be really punished by the constituents if they allow that to happen. So each side has more to lose than really to win, and that is true also for the Arab Party. If the coalition is not kept, at least for a while, certainly the left and the Arab parties and the centrist parties have nowhere to go but with the right in order to form a coalition. So that can only be a good thing for the future path of governmental coalition.
So, Professor, do you reckon that the entry of an Arab party into Israeli mainstream politics will signal a shift in policy for the country?
Absolutely. I think that never happened before for the reason that I just mentioned, because there was a low voting, low Arab participations in the electoral process, tiredness and feeling that nothing would happen. And I think that this new shift, and if indeed the promises of Mansour Abbas getting into the governments are materialized, that is to say, if he gets the money and the funding for those Arab towns, if he succeeds in curtailing the rising violence that exists in Arab towns, if we succeed in elevating the life and the welfare of the Bedouins in the Negev desert, he will have lent a certain form of credibility to entering the mainstream politics.
Well, the potential shift in policy does not seemingly resonate with Palestinians. I'm quite intrigued by their reaction that the entry of an Arab party into mainstream politics will make no difference. It will not change Palestinians' lives any better.
You are correct. In fact, this is sort of the flip side of the coin. This coalition is so fragile that if it was to push forward, aside from economic reform or economic improvement in the West Bank, it will collapse. What will be required for that to happen, and sooner rather than late, would be the entrance, the support, perhaps, of the U.S. president to support the two-state solutions, another form of solution. But they won't do it. I don't think Biden will go and start mingling right away in the new government, because he will probably look for some form of governmental stability to be reached. So you're correct that in and of itself, that government will most likely not be able to improve its relationship with its Palestinian neighbor.
Let's talk about the outgoing Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's legacy in Israel. Surely he cannot be continually vilified for his decades-old, premiership or tenure.
Well, it's interesting. I think in that sense, Benjamin Netanyahu will leave a very mixed legacy, depending if you talk to people on the right or you talk to people on the left. On the right, that many Israelis still applaud him for resisting international pressure while continuing to undermine and durable solutions to the Palestinian problem. He was successful in their eyes to marginalize the boycott, the divestment sanction, the BDS movement against Israel. And he succeeded also to create an expansionist policy, gain the American recognitions of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and was one of the orchestrator of the Abraham Accord. In addition, he is one of the also maestro of the Israeli economic success. One has to remember the Israelis ranking in the top 30 GDP country per capita in the world. But this legacy is not going to be seen the same way on the left, which his legacy is, in that perspective, challenge for undermining Palestinian rights, for expanding the settlements in the West Bank, for his relentless attacks against human rights and the democratic institutions of the state, and even for growing poverty. People don't forget that despite the rise of Israel as a top GDP country, close to 25% of Israelis live below the poverty line. And finally, he has not showed an ability to come with some sort of solution, and that would stain his legacy.
Now, Mr. Netanyahu predicted that the incoming government would be very weak on Iran and give in to U.S. demands to make concessions to the Palestinians. Does he have a point, or is he simply shooting from the hip, as as a dejected leader would be expected to?
Well, it was interesting that upon the ratifications of the approval, the recognitions of the government today, Bennett made the first speech. I mean, he was trying to make the first speech because he was constantly interrupted. But in his speech, he made clear that he was not going to be there won't be a weak coalition with respect to Iran. And this is one of the points that Bibi Netanyahu tried to make in order to create concern among some of the right-wing members of the coalitions of Bennett, with also a hope that they will retract at the last minute and not ratify the new government. So to your question, I think that both the Bennett Lapid government and the Bibi Netanyahu government have a very similar positions with respect to Iran. They will want both to have say in the nuclear deal with the United States, and I'm sure there's not much difference between the two.
Now, just picking up on outgoing Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's comment on Israel, the Israeli government being weak on Iran and, of course, conceding or giving in to U.S. demands. We've seen Bennett thanking President Joe Biden and the United States for decades of support to Israel. So what does this tell you about the potential relationship between Israel and the United States?
Well, it is unclear now. I think certainly the Biden administration is going to bring back the nuclear deals on the table. It's an important agenda that has been sort of was rescinded by the Trump administration. So that is first and foremost in his mind. But he is a tactician, and he does not want to upset the potential fragility of the governmental coalition. So I think that there is an effort certainly to gain, from the American perspective, some form of collaborations with the Israeli without giving in on the nuclear deal or renegotiating the nuclear deal.
All right, Professor Yishai, great chatting to you. Thank you so much for your analysis on this matter.
Well, my pleasure.
All right, that was Professor Micheline Yishai, the director of the Human Rights Program at the Joseph Korbel School of International Studies from Denver in Colorado.